the first of our live stream sessions of Level Up. We had one this morning for those of you that were able to attend. But I am very, very happy to be joined by Rachel Clancy. I am Alex Adams from Showcode. For those of you who don't know me, you may know me as the kid on Discord or the one that annoys you with loads of emails. Really looking forward to today's session. As I've kind of said in the build-up, Rachel delivered an amazing talk at Athena. So really looking forward to seeing what's in store today. Just a quick kind of update, I guess, ahead of time before I pass over to Rachel, is Rachel delivered an amazing talk at Athena. 20 seconds behind-ish on our end. So if you have questions, let us know throughout. Put them in the chat. We'll keep monitoring that. But just bear in mind that we're not ignoring you. It's just a slight delay. So I'll stop talking and I'll pass you over to Rachel, who will take you through gamification.
Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for the intro, Alex. As Alex mentioned, my name is Rachel Clancy, and I had done another talk last time around with Showcode on kind of gamification broadly, just the nuts and bolts of it. But this time around, because this is a gamification-focused hack, I wanted to dig into a really important part of gamification, and that's how do you know if something is fun or not by that subjective standard of measure. Let me just turn to my tab. Alex, is that coming up for you? Can you see the two little cups clinking?
Yeah, I can see player types on your screen.
Oh, that is the wrong tab. I'm just going to try this one more time. Apologies. Cool. That coming up?
Perfect.
Cool. Hello again. Let's get this going. As I said, my name is Rachel Clancy. In my day job, I am a creative at an advertising agency called Wieden in Kennedy. In 2019, I did an MA in independent games and playable experience design. So in my day job, I do a lot of kind of film work, print. We get to do some fun experiential stuff, activation stuff, where I get to bring in a little bit of my like games thinking. The job is super diverse, and I get to work with a whole different range of mediums every day, and that really feeds my ADHD inattentive brain. And during the masters, I got to try a whole bunch of different kind of gaming technologies. You got to do stuff like physical computing, 3D, AR and VR, and then also make a lot of games, which we would call trash games, really, really fast, just to kind of test and learn really quickly. And I think that is very relevant to what you guys will be doing this week during the hackathon. I also have a super small two-person game studio with my partner Ida called Tea Creature Studios, and this year we released our first game, which is called A Hero's Guide to Gardening, which is currently available for free to play on the App Store or on desktop, and I'm going to talk a small bit more about that later on. But today, the main order of business is beyond leaderboards and loyalty cards, what makes gamification fun. So we're going to talk a bit about gamification. What is fun, serious games, and brainstorming, because part of my job as a creative, I have to come up with a lot of ideas very quickly, often in a high pressure environment, which is very similar to a sort of hackathon space. So I thought maybe I can share some of the techniques we use to come up with ideas for advertising with you guys in terms of helping you come up with ideas quickly for the hack. So this week, Level-Up Society, a virtual hackathon helping to level up society by using gamification in tech. So I wanted to ask you to all, within your own minds, ponder two questions. What does gamification mean to you? How do you understand gamification and what that word means? And then what is the point of gamification? Is a loyalty card gamified? A little fact for you there. The first loyalty card is stated as being invented in 1896, which was the S&H green card stamp. So this stuff has been around for a long time. Is a leaderboard gamified? Leaderboards sort of synonymous with sports, but now synonymous with like things like CrossFit or even hackathons. Further history lesson. This man is Nick Pelling, and he's credited with first using the term gamification in 2020. And his definition was applying game-like accelerated user interface design to make electronic transactions both enjoyable and fast. I found some of these pictures from the talk he gave in, I think this was 2014, and I loved the bit where he just points to the word gamification on screen and says, "I'm Nick Pelling and I invented this." But as I've said, things like loyalty cards have been around for maybe 200-ish, almost years, and leaderboards have existed even longer than that. So taking credit for something that he did not necessarily create. So he's the self-proclaimed originator of the term. So take all of this with a grain of salt. So my understanding of gamification is that it's about figuring out what makes games so engaging and then applying those principles to things that aren't games. So what components do games have? Games have things like points, achievements, levels, player avatars, the ability to gift in-game objects to other players, badges, rankings, combats, quests, content unlocking. And what mechanics do games have? What are the actions and undertakings within games? So you've got things like win states, have you won, have you lost, turn taking, competitive play, chance, games that use randomization, transactions using in-game currency, reward, feedback, resource acquisition. So if we were to look at those two first examples, leaderboards and loyalty cards, they have points. They have achievements, getting to the top of the leaderboard, rankings, are you number 1, number 2, number 3? Resource acquisition, collect 5 stamps, get your a free dog toothbrushing on your 5th visit. Transactions, being able to exchange those points for freebies and perks, and competition, tapping into our natural competitive urges to want to be the top of the totem pole. But I found this quote from game designer Jane McGonigal, who said that gamification should make tasks hard, not easy. And she says a lot of things have the bells and whistles, but not the heart of a game. So you'll see a lot of experiences that use things like points, badges, streaks, combos, but that's kind of it. It's all very aesthetic and very surface level. And it's not really tapping into that kind of intrinsic motivation as to why we find things fun or find things compelling to play. And when you look at that against what Nick Pelling said, applying game-like accelerated user interface design to make electronic transactions both enjoyable and fast, he's talking about, using the mechanics of games to make things easier, more intuitive, and to kind of speed the user through it. But Jane is saying that to get the most out of it, we can slow things down, and it's not about making things fast and easy. It's about making things kind of deeper and more meaningful. So we're going to talk a bit about motivation. Gamification works by tapping into the things we find motivating and using them to drive a desired behavior. So if we were to look at the list of some things that people find motivating, not everyone will find all of these things motivating, but most people will find at least one of these things motivating. So things like mastery, that feeling of looking at your performance on the first level of a game versus looking at your performance on level 30, and that feeling of like, I'm getting better at this. I can see my progression, how I'm leveling up as I go through. Purpose, narrative, giving, altruism. So a lot of narrative games will have kind of endings based on your performance in the game, and people are driven by trying to get the good ending, or maybe there are some people out there who are deliberately putting their player character through the worst experience possible to try and give them the bad ending. Status, leaderboards, achievement, being the best at the thing that you're doing. Social connections, playing with others or playing in competition with others. Rewards, points, badges, achievements, lotteries. Peer pressure, kind of boasting, bragging systems, again, playing into that kind of achievements point. We're also very loss averse as humans. We hate the idea of losing points, breaking a streak, losing the game. Autonomy, things like character customization, being able to chart your own path through a game. And scarcity, the idea that there's only a certain amount of room at the top, that there are unique rewards for rare achievements. And so looking at all of these together, a simple way of understanding this list is, which would you rather do? Go out and pick trash with your hands and put it in a bag, or would you rather slam dunk the trash through a basketball hoop? And the simple and all as this example is, there's a couple of different motivating factors going on in here. So basically, in a nutshell, how to find the things that people find fun. in an experience. And I say fun as kind of a broad umbrella term, but it doesn't necessarily have to be kind of joyful, playful fun. It can also be like challenging, frustrating fun, or like thinking of like horror game experiences, like scary fun or stressful fun. But I think fun, engagement is a bit of a jargon word, so I think fun is kind of an easier, more human way of putting it. So, what is fun? These are three things that people could argue are fun, but they are all vastly different from each other. The first is a Sudoku puzzle, sort of a brain training logic puzzle. The second is zorbing, where you put yourself in a giant inflatable ball and charge around a playing field or roll yourself down a hill. And the third is interactive immersive theater. Now, out of this list, the one that I would most personally find fun is the zorbing, because I know my personal taste is I like movement. I like kind of sensory fun. I love like dancing games, rhythm games. I love Beat Saber. And I'm not that competitive. I just kind of like throwing myself around, having a fun time. Sudoku probably would be the second thing I would consider, but I'm not that kind of puzzle oriented, and I not that patient either. So that I can see why someone would find that fun, but it's not something I would personally find fun. And this last one, which is interactive immersive theater, and I most certainly would rather have my teeth removed without anesthetic than have to take part in an interactive theater experience. It's my idea of hell. And if I go to a play and it seems like they're coming down into the audience, like my soul leaves my body. I cannot understand how anyone would find that fun, but a lot of people do. And immersive theater is a thriving industry. So all this to say, fun is extremely subjective. The games theorist Marc LeBlanc did a little exercise on trying to categorize the different types of fun. Some of them I've just mentioned, things like my personal brand of fun, which is sensation fun, senses, sight, sound, movement, touch. Challenge, which is things like obstacle courses and mastery. Fantasy, make-believe, escapism, games that have really engrossing narratives. Submission, which he uses the word submission, but it's to mean that kind of giving yourself over to the activity, allowing yourself to get lost, immersed, and having that as kind of like your dedicated space for recreation. Discovery, which is the kind of provoking your curiosity to explore uncharted territories. There's self-expression, creativity. Fellowship, which is again that kind of social side, social framework, teamwork, rivalry. And narrative, drama, suspense, mystery, which if we were to look at the examples above, narrative, that would be your immersive theater fans who might also get a little bit of fellowship, that kind of social framework. There's some expression going on in there. Looking at Sudoku, it does have, even though it's not an obstacle course, it does have that element of challenge, infinitely, submission. People get super immersed into it and get lost. And as I said, zorbing, sensation, sight, sound, touch, movement, rolling down a hill. So further categorization for fun, I found on the website of Andrzej Markowski, who is a games theorist who does a lot of work in kind of gamification theory. And again, he had kind of subdivided these even further. He's got achievement fun, free-spirited fun, social fun, unfacilitated personal fun, facilitated personal fun. And this is a lot of theory to throw at you, but what I want to achieve in doing this is just getting you to think about some of the different categories you can consider when designing your gamified experience. What out of these kind of fun factors are you tapping into? And when you are kind of working with your outline idea, asking yourself, what out of these am I offering players? What is there beyond, again, just scoring points and moving up a leaderboard can I offer them? Will keep them engaged, and that will tap into something beyond just those kind of surface level ideas. So another really interesting piece of kind of player and game theory that I came across during my master's was this idea of player types from the researcher Richard Bartle. There are now 8 player types, but I'm sticking to his original 4 for simplicity. And so he has the killer, the achiever, the socializer, and the explorer. So the achiever is focused on status, achieving goals. They like to do things quickly, completely. These are the guys who are doing the speed runs. These are like the completionists who want to get 100% of the achievements in the game. And obviously, as the name suggests, they're engaged by achievements. The killer player type is very similar to the achiever. They are focused on winning rank, peer-to-peer competition. But the interesting thing about the killer, in contrast to the achiever, is that it's not enough for them to win. They also want others to lose. And so you could say they're engaged by leaderboards and ranking. The socializer are people who are socialized, are focused on socializing in a drive to develop a network of friends, to cooperate, to be a good team player. And they can be engaged by things like a friends list, seeing who else do you know is online and available to play with you, things like chats, newsfeeds, seeing what other players are up to. And then the explorer, who are focused on exploring, driven to discover the unknown. And they like things such as mystery or hidden goals. This is from the website Gamification, and this is talking about player types in virtual worlds. So you might see the killer looking for battles, looking to beat the others. The achiever is looking to collect rare stuff, also beat the game. But as I said, they do not have the same factor as beat the others. They're just trying to beat the experience. Our explorer, discovery, history, immersion, these are the guys who might be really interested in like a really rich like narrative lore for the world. And our socializers, they just want to meet other people, have a chat, and have a nice time. I'm just really drilling into these motivation models. I'll do at the end of this is I'm going to kind of collate all of this stuff into sort of a reference guide, and I'll share it with Alex so that you can all look back on this later. But I just wanted to kind of bombard you with food for thought on all of these different ways of considering motivation. Destruction, like can a gamified experience be about taking something apart? Can it be something, can you frame an altruistic idea in something that it seems inherently destructive? Completionists, like is there something about covering an entire territory and appealing to that kind of achiever's 100% completionist mindset? And creativity as well, like are you creating an expansive kind of emergent system? Are you giving players the tools to kind of make something on their own, and you haven't defined the end goal? You're actually kind of giving them a space to create something themselves. And that's a little bit I want to say about motivation. In psychology and in kind of game and play theory, we talk about intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic motivation, motivated to perform an activity to earn a reward or avoid punishment or avoid a loss state. Intrinsic motivation, motivated to perform an activity for its own sake and personal rewards. So kind of looking again at where these two things fall. So external, extrinsic things like competition, progression, fantasy, narrative, problem solving, but then the kind of more personal, internal things, that flow state, that immersion, your humor, your curiosity, your creativity, Schadenfreude, which I found is super interesting, that kind of feeling of kind of humor at other people's despair and misfortune. So I think all this stuff is like quite heady, but the best way of understanding it is to look at it in application in some examples. So this first one is from the game theorist I mentioned, Jane McGonigal, and it's called Swing Voter Go. And basically, this is taking the kind of narrative framework of Pokemon Go and using it to get people to identify people in their Facebook friends list who live in swing states, and then kind of using the aesthetics of Pokemon Go and getting them to kind of seek out their swing voters and speak to them about defeating Trump in this case. And so what this offers, if we look at some of our motivation factors, this is the kind of experience that you could see appealing to your achiever, your socializer, possibly even your killer, because there's like quite a big win-lose pull here. And it features humor, altruism, the feeling that you're doing a good thing, fellowship. Yourself and the other players are all kind of pulling together to try and swing the election. And the extrinsic motivation, there's a narrative. It is borrowing a lot from our understanding of the world and mission of Pokemon Go. It's got problem solving. How are we going to find these people? How are you going to have those conversations and swing them over? Progression, there's kind of a heat map you can track to see how other players are getting along. And collaboration, everyone doing the same thing and working together. So this one is Swedish speed cameras pays drivers to slow down. This designer, Kevin Richardson, created a speed lamp lottery. So drivers who break the speed limit and are caught out by the speed camera have to pay a fine, but drivers who obey the speed limit are entered into a lottery, and the winning prize fund comes from the fines paid by speeding motorists. So I thought this was a fabulous example of Schadenfreude in action, and that feeling of not only am I doing the right thing, but I also know that someone out there is suffering and will have to pay the price for their carelessness, and I might reap the rewards of that. So I think it would probably be quite appealing to those with the killer mindset. It does have Schadenfreude. It has an element of surprise, definitely lots of humor, and a little bit of competition as well. This one is called Pain Squad, and it's a mobile game that gamifies cancer treatment for sick kids. And so what this app does is it's essentially a reporting tool so that kids who are going through treatment can document where they're experiencing pain, kind of write reports on their experience, so researchers can kind of gather this data, sort of track and monitor their pain. But it's wrapped in this narrative wrapper that the kids are rookie detectives, and that everything is skinned up like a detective's journal. So it's taking that kind of really creative idea and thinking about like what would a sick kid be interested in, and how to reframe the idea of pain into something that kind of has this sort of fantasy element that takes them out of the negative of the experience and puts it into something that has altruism, creativity, collaboration, the fact that you're working with these other fictional detectives in the force to solve this problem. And I think that because of the sort of like open-ended storytelling, I think it has some really nice appeal to that sort of like explorer, narrative-driven player profile. This one is really, really, really cool. And on the surface of it, it seems like quite dry and technical, but I think there's so much going on here. It's a game called Fold It, where they designed a system where, like kind of open source, anyone can use it. Players can model protein structures, and in doing so, they can kind of they're trying to achieve certain configurations, and in doing so, they are modeling real world proteins. And scientists are taking this data and applying it to their research. And in I think 10 days after launch, they solved a huge mystery with the protein structure key to the growth of HIV. And it's still running now, and players are able to kind of model their own proteins and show different features. I saw one recently that was kind of like the top pick of the week, and it was this hydrophobic protein molecule that someone had created. So it's got lots. I think there's like the social side, because you can share what you create. It's got that achievement built into it, because you are rewarded for kind of working through different structures. And also, like, if you are the person who goes on to make a really important discovery, then you are like rewarded and held up in the community. There's exploration, because you learn about the kind of science side of what you're doing as you're going through making these structures. And I think it's got all the makings of a great puzzle game, but then it's got a really important kind of purpose to it as well. So it's not just a sort of 3D digital Rubik's Cube. You also are on a real mission to do something important. And this last one is something that comes from my agency, Wieden and Kennedy London, that I read about years ago, and I just thought it was so cool. It's called Grid Run Your City. And the brief from Nike was to encourage people in London to get running. So what they did was they created these phone booths where you could call in, and by running between them, you sort of took over quadrants on this grid of the city. And so you could take over areas in your postcode. So if you ran between the three postcodes or 3 phone boxes in South London, you would take over that square. And so this is tied into a big leaderboard. You can work with other runners to kind of team up together and run the neighborhood as a little pack. And I think there's something probably for everyone in here. There's the exploration, like where's the next box, where am I running to, or maybe I'm running through a neighborhood I've never been through before. Achievement, being able to see that you've taken over a whole square by yourself. Competitive play, you can win and others can lose. You can win territory, lose territory, and the social side of it as well. The fact that you can either kind of take the social side of I'm doing something and so many other people in my city are doing it as well. There's kind of like the online presence of it, or that I'm going to run with my team and we're going to take over the city together. So I thought it was really cool, fun. And like, I love the physicality of it as well. Like this is, out of the examples, one that has like a real kind of like putting your whole body into it. And it's not just a digital game. It's also something that you play by physically moving. So when designing your experiences this week, it's important to understand who am I designing for and what motivates them, and kind of identifying your target audience and trying to have a good long think about what might appeal to them on a motivation level. So next, we're going to talk about serious games. A serious game or applied game is a game designed for a primary purpose other than pure entertainment. And this comes from a paper by Thomas Malone called What Makes Things Fun to Learn, a study of intrinsically motivating computer games. And this is a paper I had to refer to a lot while I was doing my master's thesis, because I was making my game A Hero's Guide to Gardening, which in a nutshell is an interactive narrative game for kids 10 to 12 designed to help players develop their emotional literacy and begin a conversation about positive mental health. And in this game, it plays a bit like an interactive comic book, and players are helping the main character at her first summer at camp. She wants to be an adventurer, but she ends up stuck in the gardening department, and she has to solve all of these problems to do with the other characters' gardens. And those problems are kind of playable metaphors for dealing with mental health issues. So the first picture here is Oriel, and her character kind of represents fear and out of control anxiety. And in her garden, she has these weeds that are taking over, and she keeps plucking them and pulling them out, but more keep growing back. And her story is around that it's, if you are suffering from anxiety about something, then you can't just push it down and ignore it, because that is in a way just reinforcing the fear. What you have to do is be able to kind of look at it, acknowledge it for what it is, but then not let it overwhelm you either. The second one is Grace, the character who represents anger. Her garden is being taken over by these aggressive barb blossom plants, and her original approach is to just try to beat them to death with a rake, but she discovers that they are as misunderstood as she is, and that if they're treated with a little bit of kindness and compassion, that they become great garden guardians. And Cosmo, our sad frog, his issue is that he's very sad and he thinks that nothing is growing in his garden, but in actual fact what he has are climbing flowers, and they just need a little bit of extra support to grow through having a climbing frame. And just like Cosmo, who, because he's feeling down, he needs a little bit of extra support, but that doesn't mean that he isn't a great friend, and it doesn't mean that those flowers aren't beautiful just because they need a little something extra to be their best selves. And the game also uses these dialogue systems where the player character, Numi, can talk to the other characters. And in the game, what we were trying to do was play with sort of misconceptions around mental health. So in all of the first conversations Numi has with the characters, she kind of barges in and she tells them that she's going to help them, or she tells them not to worry, or she tells them, wow, you've got a bad attitude. And we sort of wanted to draw on kind of well-intentioned but possibly ill-informed approaches to helping friends who are going through poor mental health. And so Numi has a first conversation with every character, and then after playing the mini games, she has a second conversation where we try to model kind of more positive and empathetic ways of having these conversations. The next example I want to show you is a game called Herna by a game designer called Momo Pixels. And she created this game, which is about racial microaggressions, where you play as a character who is trying to go through her life and travel freely through the world, while white women persist on trying to touch her hair. And so the game has a little character creator screen where you can choose her hairstyle, and then she travels through different locations while trying to fend off women touching her hair. And I have a little extract from an interview that Momo did. And the writer asks, how do you see the game changing those who might have actually touched a Black woman's hair in the past? I think that sometimes they think they are the only one fascinated by our hair, but in reality, a lot of people are. You aren't the only one who reached for my hair today, Susan. So I hope that this game shows how stressful and disrespectful this issue is, which ultimately gets them to stop. Also, if this game gets used, maybe they'll stop asking, can I touch it as well? A very unusual play. This is a serious game, but probably the least serious game you could possibly imagine. This was a VR experience that KFC created for the Oculus that aims to increase the speed at which new employees can be onboarded into hot fried chicken by creating this sort of digital chicken frying simulator. So, I mean, at its most essential part, this is walking a new employee through the nuts and bolts of putting the chicken in the flour, putting the chicken in the fryer, and then for some strange reason, feeding it to the Colonel Sanders door knocker. But through the creativity and set design and narrative, making it certainly memorable and highly, highly bizarre.
We also just had a very quick question around serious games as well, Rachel.
Sure.
But so if I am right, a serious game is more about developing emotions and intelligence by interacting and getting involved with things rather than just being entertained.
Yes. So yeah, it was probably worth pulling the two apart. So gamification is a kind of applying game thinking to non-game experiences, and serious games are still games through and through. They are games that are they are sort of a hybrid of entertainment and education. So they have an education goal at the end, and that's kind of what would define them as a serious game. That they have a purpose, they have a message, and it can be as a literal message, like how to fry chicken, or it can be maybe more of a sort of meditative, emotional message. But it's a broad category, and it's kind of defined by the people who use it. But it needs to stand on its own as a game, and be fun or engaging or scary or stressful and work as a game. But it also needs to have that kind of intention of a designer to convey an educational message of one kind or another, if that makes sense.
It does indeed. Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. Keep them coming, and I'll keep butting in.
Cool. So this one, Shapes and Ladders, it is from a creative who's actually joined Widen's recently. Herself and her partner shared this earlier this week. And I had a look at it, and I thought it was just really smart and really great. And it's online now if anyone is interested in playing it. It's called Shapes and Ladders. And this game talks about inequality in the workplace and does the storytelling through the game mechanics. So you play as one of these three characters. You can play as a little square, and as a square you have access to square platforms, square circle platforms, square circle triangle platforms. As a circle you have access to circle platforms and circle triangle platforms. As a triangle you have access to only the triangle platforms, and then you have to navigate your way through the workspace with only the platforms accessible to that particular shape. And going through the game, there are little pickup objects, your coins, and then there are also obstacle objects. So you're trying to collect your coins, but then you hit the uniform, the interview suit object, and it sends a little pop-up saying this interview suit was expensive, but you need it to get the job. So there's all these kind of narrative elements about kind of income inequality, how when you are just starting out and trying to break into the job market, that you have no money, you are not treated very well, you are expected to have these resources that will allow you to, show up, have the right kit, have the right look. And then on top of that, the fact that, beyond just like the cost inequality, the little shapes serve as a metaphor for any kind of like outgroup minority the player might want to read into it. They could stand for racial discrimination, they could stand for neurodiversity discrimination, they could stand for gender inequality, they could stand for physical disability. And playing through it, I just thought that not only having these like little kind of narrative written pop-ups that show up throughout the game, like, okay, you can save time because you've completed the spreadsheet workshop, or you've lost resources because of the interviews. It's not just the kind of written elements and the super cute and engaging artwork and level design, but it's even the platforming. I after playing it for a little while, I noticed that as the square character, I could jump up to the top of the room, and there's this kind of rail that runs all the way through from one side to the other, that the square can just run along. And I thought that was really smart. So you can imagine who the square is in this situation, who is the person that has all of this inbuilt privilege that can just run over the obstacles that the other characters have to navigate and maneuver around. And the lower down to the ground you are, the more of those kind of negative pickup objects you'll encounter. I just thought that it's a really smartly constructed game, and also in a hackathon there's not a lot of time to kind of go for polish, but I just thought the art was really gorgeous, and that they take every opportunity to put in these kind of little moments, like when you get a game over, you are there with your little cardboard box packing up because you've lost your job. So this is a game that arguably might or might not be a serious game, but I thought it was a nice example of how a game necessarily doesn't have to be fun to carry a message. And it's called Every Day the Same Dream. And in this game, you basically play on a time loop over and over and over again, where this man has to get up, get dressed, go to work, sit down in his desk job, and you play through the loop again and again and again and again. And it uses boredom as a way of driving the story. And I can't tell you any more about it without giving it away, but it's a real exercise in simplicity. And again, when you're in the short amount of time that you've got to work with in a hackathon, being able to do simplicity, but do simplicity in a way that's kind of clever, is a real asset. And again, this is like the simplest thing you could possibly imagine. It's a game called Loneliness, a not game by Jordan Magnuson. It has some really beautiful music by Kevin MacLeod. And in this game, you play as a little pixel, this one in the center of the screen, and you travel through this world of other pixels. And again, can't tell you a huge amount about it without ruining it. But again, a movable pixel on a gray background, and it tells quite a poignant story about loneliness. And the fact that it's so minimal really allows you as the player to kind of, as you go through it, it's a short enough game that you can kind of infer all your own feelings about loneliness and all your own feelings about what the other squares are doing and what that means. And I think we've talked a lot about fun, but fun, engagement, good storytelling. It's not that it has to be joyful, but it's that it has something that is meaningful for the player. So next, let me see how we're doing on time. Cool, we are good. We're going to talk a little bit about brainstorming and coming up with ideas quickly. So we use this kind of device for coming up with ideas at Wieden's. So when we're setting up ideas in the deck, we go insight, which is what is the problem you're trying to solve, and then idea, how do you propose to solve it? And it's very simple, but if you use this technique right at the start when you are kind of setting up your intention for what you want to do, it really helps to have this to refer back to. And that way, as you're going through the making process, you can always refer back to what was our insight and how is our idea supporting it. And if you're trying to figure out if something is relevant or not, it's really great to kind of have this established and locked in right at the front. So I'm going to show 2 examples of ideas that my partner Katie and I came up with that they are just we always like starters for 10 thought starters. And these are 2 things that will probably never get made. So I think it's safe for me to share them with you. So this first one is called Snack Revolution. And the problem is obesity, that we can't grasp the calorie content of junk food. And so because we're an advertising company, we always do this thing of like testing it as a PR headline. So a proposed PR headline would be "Turn sweat into snacks with dance-powered vending machine." And so the solution would be we create a snack revolution game where players are rewarded with snacks based on how much energy they burn dancing, aiming to earn a bottle of Coke or a chocolate bar that's going to cost you 3 hours of nonstop dancing. And then the next step, because we were working with this brief of how do we help everyone eat better, and the idea is that it creates a tangible connection between the empty calories you consume from junk food and the effort it takes to burn them off, as well as highlighting better, healthy alternative snacks. And the next one, back to the barcade. So we haven't been to the pub for a year, and our kind of pub social skills aren't up to scratch. So let's get back to the pub and back in the game and with the barcade. So we could launch a micro/online arcade to simulate the pub experience and get punters pub ready ahead of the 21st. Each of the 10 mini games will riff off a pub experience. So we were thinking about things like kind of like a balancing game where you have to weave through a crowd, or like a button mashing game where you have to like hold your bladder because you're in the bathroom queue, or kind of like a Frogger style game where you're trying to get the barman's attention at a crowded bar again. And why would a beer fan care? We'll include arcade ticket system for players, so they'll be able to redeem their points for real world prizes. So again, super simple setup, and off the back of that, you can take these sort of blueprints and use them as your kind of guiding principles for the gamification or serious games that you are looking to create with your team. Finally, I wanted to just give you some little watch outs to have also in the back of your mind as you're coming up with your ideas and kind of interrogating your desired outcome. And I wanted to mention this thing called the Cobra Effect, which is when a well-intentioned measure can backfire and have the opposite effect to intended. So in India, they had this cobra infestation problem, and so they launched a bounty for dead cobras for a cash reward. But the unintended side effect is that people started farming cobras for the purpose of claiming the bounty. So in actual fact, creating more cobras. And the way I can kind of maybe put this into gamification terms is talking a little bit on a little bit of a tangent about juice, which is something I talked about in the last gamification prez I did with Showcode. Which is the stuff that makes a game feel really good to play. And again, in the limited time that you guys have got for putting an experience together, the visual level of polish is, the expectation isn't that high because everyone knows that you don't have a whole ton of time, but it is taking into account like the animation, graphics, sound design, like haptic feedback, like the rumble of the controller, just all that stuff that makes a game feel really satisfying to play. And when you tune it up right, it can take really simple experience, like how many platformer games are there in the world, but the way they can differentiate themselves from each other is like having really good game juice, having really good game feel, and having a really nice aesthetic world built around them. So this is just a selection of different games with different kinds of juice. Untitled Goose Game has great music, great animation, very charming character design. Hades, again, like really great combat system punctuated by all these like flares, particle effects. Great Rumble, Watam, this mad kind of goalless game where you play as these little characters and try combining them together and seeing what sort of strange things can happen. But again, just an absolute carnival for the eyes to look at. Splatoon, great bombastic, fun, colorful combat system. And so where you see this juice in a gamification context is on social media. Subtle feature, but social media sites try to capture that really nicely fine-tuned user experience by having these animations, these flares that make the experience of engaging with content, liking, sharing, retweeting, have a little bit of that kind of visual hook that tickles our optic nerves. But all this to say that through the juice, through the understanding of motivation, through understanding players, to really kind of getting under people's skin and trying to understand what is compelling to people, we are, you know, getting really deep into people's kind of minds and into psychology. But with social media, I think the argument of making these really addictive behavior patterns has, as time gone on, proven to be a pretty double-edged sword at best, and kind of a negative thing at worst for people. And that on the intrinsic versus extrinsic argument, it's taking things that people used to find intrinsically motivating, like talking to their friends or like sharing pictures of things they're interested in, and kind of having that sort of personal creativity. But now you've kind of stuck a scoring system on it, and like, you know, putting a point counter on a picture of me and my friends, or putting a point counter on a picture of my face, like what is that doing to people? What's that doing to their self-esteem? It's just creating a system where people can numerically compare their lives to each other. And just as game designers, as playable experience designers, as designers in general, just thinking about, are we making a good thing that's good for the user, or making something that's healthy and helpful for them? Yeah, designing with compassion and care and empathy for the people who are using our systems in mind. And that is it, I think. Thank you all for listening. There was a big technical section in the middle, so if anyone has any questions about that, I am here to answer them. But if anyone wants to ask any questions after the fact, these are all of our socials. We're at T Creature Studios on Instagram. We are at T Creatures on Twitter. And if you want to check out anything to do with Heroes Guide, we are at tcreaturestudios.com. It has all the links for playing the games. And yeah, I hope that was interesting, and I hope I threw a lot of food for thought at you ahead of your work this weekend. I think it's happening.
It is this weekend, yeah. And that was amazing. Thank you very much. Like Rachel says, if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. If you've got any retrospectively, then let us know. We can always pass them along, or you can direct them directly to T Creatures. I think I just had a question while the others filter through. Is you mentioned it a few times around, you know, the restrictions this weekend and a hackathon, and it being a very intense time environment. You've been through the process with the Heroes Guide and things like that in the past. So I guess, what do you think priority wise and things for people to focus on and to spend kind of more and less time on as they go through this like 48-hour thing? Like, what are the most important factors, I guess?
I think everyone knows the idea of like minimum viable product. It's like, what's the smallest way this idea can work? Like, what's the simplest thing? Like what's the text adventure version of the thing that we want to make? And then kind of setting stretch goals after that. And then at each stage of like, okay, we've done the simplest version and we've tested it. So now we feel confident that this is working. So now we can add like another like layer of like, now it's going to have graphics, and we've tested it and we found that's working. So I think it's like, even if you think you're being really conservative in your estimate of like how complicated something is going to be, it's just like, God laughs at our weak human plans and what we think is actually so. Because I thought Heroes Guide was like, yeah, we'll get it done in 6 months, and we were working on it for 2 years. 2 years. So yeah, you can never be too careful with your plans.
I think that's very wise advice, especially considering they've only got 48 hours this weekend. So very wise advice indeed.
Nice to your teammates, and yeah, remember to have fun as well, because it's stressful. And I think, I mean, technology is the most fickle and, you know, unreliable thing that in the moment when you need it to work the most, it'll let you down. So yes, I think good kind of self-talk and good kind of team spirit is also really important on like the soft human side.
A very interesting question in the chat as well, actually. What app have you used that utilizes gamification that's impacted your life the most?
Oh, Duolingo, because Ida, my girlfriend, is Spanish, and I have quite an impressive, I think it's like a 407-day streak. I started last year during the first lockdown, And like Duolingo has a lot of gamification features. It's got leaderboards, it's got point scoring, it's got a difficulty curve because the lessons get more complicated as it goes on. And then it's got like a bunch of premium features, which I refuse to pay for. But it's like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's fun, but the thing that has really hooked me is the streak, is that like, I don't want to break my streak. And it does have like these get out of jail, like streak freezes. But like, that's the thing about like the nuts and bolts of gamification. There's some really just simple principles about what humans like and what humans don't like. And we like the sense of like accumulation and more. And then when you have a bigger number, you're afraid of losing the bigger number. So it just taps into like a real kind of primal lizard brain sense of loss aversion. So it's good to have that stuff, but it's also great to have like the deeper stuff, which really will set ideas apart and make them stand out and make them memorable for people.
Awesome. I think that seems to be it for now. We'll see. There may be a few more stream through, but if you do, again, either follow Rachel, follow the guys on Tea Creature Studios, ask them directly, or drop them to us on Discord and we can ask. But a big thank you for everyone attending, and a massive thank you to you, Rachel. That was helpful for me. I don't know about the hackers, but it was helpful for me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, all that stuff in the middle about like, I was conscious like pretending that there's so many subdivisions of like different people's opinions of fun. And like, if you start looking for kind of models of fun or theories of fun, you'll find so many different approaches to it. And the most important takeaway, I think, is just think about fun beyond just those kind of surface level attributes, and find out for yourself, what do you find useful. And I hope it was all just a lot of brain food and kind of opened up your minds to all of the different things your experience, your serious game or your gamified system could be.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Cool. Thank you, everyone. Bye.